Hi, I'm Christopher Nudo, and this is Your Life and Legacy, where faith, finances, and personal values come together to shape the impact we leave behind. Today, I'm joined by David Klyman, partner at David Klyman Financial. David's story is deeply personal. When his son opened the firm, David stepped in to help build not just the business, but a family mission, one centered on relationships, trust, and helping families overcome obstacles so they can grow, thrive, and become better stewards of their financial future. As a father of six and now six grandchildren as well, he really understands life and the weight of family responsibility. David brings both heart and practical wisdom to the conversation. I'll open by grounding the conversation in David's personal why. The decision to turn financial advising into a family calling. This segment sets the emotional and value-based foundation for this episode. So, David, thank you for being on the show today. It's great to have you. Let me just ask you, when your son opened Klyman Financial, what made you say, I want to build it with him?
So thank you, Chris, just for having me on the show. We appreciate that. And it's a bit of a story just because he started the firm. I was working for a hedge fund at the time. I've been in sales all my life. And when he opened the firm, he asked me, can you come and help me grow it? So, just over the past, we've had our financial difficulties over the time. So it's a very personal choice for me to bring financial literacy, financial education, and talk about money and talk about what money means to people. Because, for me, like we could get into this a little bit more. But, my parents, when I was growing up, everything was a secret. You didn't talk about anything. You didn't talk about money issues. So when I went through my own difficulties financially, I didn't talk about it really. And then I had that same type of legacy. But over that period of time, in order to get out of that, and we'll obviously talk about that a little bit more in the segment, it became more important to talk about, open up about it and talk to him about it. So when my son opened up his financial planning firm and asked me to come and join him, based on our previous experience and what we can bring as value add to potential clients, it was a no-brainer.
Oh, I love that. I love the fact that you had the insight to really understand that most families, it's like a dirty little secret. They'll talk about the craziest things, but they won't share money and financial decisions. And as such, they don't educate the next generation. They don't pass on a good legacy because they weren't passed on a good legacy. So now that we've set that as the foundation, tell me what you've really done in your family and for others to really change that system.
So, and again, and Chris, what you said is exactly head on. And, as I said, my parents, everything was a secret. Like my father would go in for surgery that my mother wouldn't even tell us. Financial questions were taboo. It's like if you talked about it, it would bring like the evil eye on you or whatnot. But what we've done, and we're what we call behavioral financial advisors. So our first step is just to do a value assessment with potential clients, just to find out what they're all about, what they're looking to accomplish. What do they want to do? Short-term, medium-term, long-term. And it's not just financial, but it's more like, what do you want to accomplish in your life? Do you want to retire at 65? Do you want to leave a legacy to your children? What is that going to look like? And we have a little card game that we play. It's a deck of 52 cards with 52 values on it. And so what we do is we go through an exercise where you come down with your top 5 values. And once we've done that, then we can talk financially. Then we'll go into a very in-depth financial fact find to get a picture of where you are right now. And that's how we're going to build a relationship, because we're going to get to know you. We don't have any prepackaged solutions. It's not one size fits all. It's going to be based on what you're looking to accomplish, what your current situation is like, and where do you want to go. And you can't get to where you want to go if you don't know where you are now.
It's absolutely true. And having your end game in focus allows you then to chart your course, as you said so well. So let me ask you, taking it back to the family, how has this impacted your relationship with your son? And then how has it impacted possibly other children that you have within the family? And yeah, I don't even know, how do you have any grandchildren who are at an age where, learning these financial principles are valuable?
So, I mean, you got a lot of questions there. So I have five sons and one daughter, and five grandsons, and now I have a new granddaughter. First time in 37 years there's been a female Klyman, a new female Klyman at least. But it's interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting point because when I joined my son, first of all, I think it helped also that he had started it. So he laid the foundation. He felt like he had that input. A lot of times you'll see like a family business where they're at odds with each other. The father is running the show. He doesn't really want his son to come in with any new ideas. He just wants to fit in. So I think that helped a lot that he had started it. I have obviously a lot of experience in finance and sales over many, many years, but I could give him suggestions, and we had that kind of mutual respect. I think the biggest part that surprised me was I found out with just working with him on a day-to-day basis, and we talked, multiple times every day, that there's a lot of similarities I didn't realize that we had. And when we come to like looking at areas of financial, and not just financial, but other areas, I find that, we have a meeting of the minds like very quickly. So when we're at a client, and typically we'll go together, and we like the father son, this, we call it son father because he started it and throws people off a little bit, but we like that. But for some people, they relate to a younger person. So my son, some people, they'll relate to an older person like myself, but we'll get, we'll be able to get that range. Sometimes it's both together that works, but I'll know what he's thinking. He'll know what I'm thinking much quicker. And that kind of surprised me. So that relationship built from there. The rest of the children, I think that they saw that once I came in with my son, we were able to rely on him a lot more because, you see him growing up. You remember him when he was 5 years old. You don't remember him like now he's a mature, trained professional and a high level of expertise. It's sort of hard to relate to that. But once my other kids saw me going in, that made a difference. Now, my oldest grandson is 14, and it's a funny thing. I live in New Jersey, and so when we first started, we wanted to teach some financial literacy in the high schools because that's really where it has to start, even earlier, I would say. So they don't really have the budgeting, the financial acumen. They're not really aware of it. So, when you get that first credit card application when you're going to college, all of a sudden, wow, I got $5,000 here. I can spend and do whatever I want, which is absolutely the wrong thing. We approached these schools to offer complimentary courses, and, they just blew us off. So that was kind of surprising. And we see that there's a real issue and opportunity to provide education even at a younger age.
So let me ask, what is you've already opened the can of worms that one of the biggest obstacles is just lack of communication, lack of wanting to be transparent about finances. But in the last couple minutes we have here in this segment, explain what there's some other obstacles you see in families that families need to really first recognize and overcome in order to really settle well in their financial future.
Well, like Chris, any type of person that needs help has to want it, right? You can't help somebody that doesn't want it. So you have that first desire from people that they know where they're in trouble for. So for me, I had a lot of financial issues. I had to, I'm in a situation where, I could lose everything and I need that financial education. So when you need it, that's when you ask for that help. So, that's certainly the most important, and to be open to it and it doesn't become the blame game. That's a very important foundation to lay. You're not going to blame everybody. Everybody does the best they can. And you want to build that trust and relationship over time. And that's why our process really helps with that, because we want to get to know your values, as I mentioned, and hear you out, hear what you have to say, not as a way of blaming or judging, but just to get to know where you are now, so we'll know where you want to go.
Yeah. And relationships are the foundation for anything we do. You built a relationship with your wife before you got married. You build a relationship with your banker. That's maybe a little old school. So hopefully our older generation understands that. We build relationships, and then from those relationships, we learn to work together. And unfortunately, in today's society, that equation has been flipped on its head. People want you to work with you without even building that trust. So at Klyman Financial, I see you guys have your priorities set properly in that you're building that relationship first. What am I saying is I want to transition by saying that legacy doesn't begin with documents or dollars. It begins with what we value and what we model and what we choose to build with the people closest to us. And that's that relationship, David, you and I were talking about. So when we come back, we're going to visit that relationship further and dive into why Klyman Financial is as valuable as they are. Welcome back to Your Life and Legacy. Stay connected to this show and every Now Media TV favorite, live or on demand, anytime you'd like. Download the free Now Media TV app on Roku or iOS and unlock nonstop bilingual programming in English and Spanish. You on the move? Catch the podcast version at nowmedia.tv. Welcome back to Your Life and Legacy. My guest today is David Klyman of Klyman Financial, and we're talking about what it really means to take and help families move from financial uncertainty to clarity, confidence, and long-term stability. So I'll move into the practical side of stewardship. How families can become more knowledgeable, more intentional, and more equipped to make wise financial decisions that support the people they love. So, David, when a family comes to you feeling like way overwhelmed, about their finances, and gosh, you and I know that that could be because of so many reasons. Where do you begin so they don't feel judged and hurt and intimidated in some way?
So, I mean, in these days in these times, of course, everything is so overwhelming. There's so many different factors that are always playing. So the first step that we do with any client, and whether it's with I would say typically it's just going to be with one of the partners, usually either the husband or the wife. One of them is usually going to start off with, and then we'll bring in the partner perhaps at a later date, just because it's usually one of the two that are more motivated to solve this financial issue and to get some clarity on that. But I think the first area what I like to do is just to explain my own background, that I did it too. I had my own financial issues, and I almost came to a point where I had a lot of debt, and I didn't know where to turn, and someone came and helped me, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there's no judgment here. Everybody makes mistakes. We're human beings. We are here to make mistakes. It's going to happen. But when you can ask for help and you don't, that's really the shame of it. That when there's a help available and you don't want to turn to that, and you feel like embarrassed or shameful, that's the part that really holds people back.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you're sharing your own vulnerability. I have learned, and you have learned, that in business, when people really can relate to you when you share what you've gone through yourself. They know you're human. They know that you struggle just like they do. I think the adage used to be, you put your pants on one leg at a time also. David, to the extent you're comfortable, can you share with our viewers just, the struggles that you put yourself in so that other viewers might understand that you're the same as them?
Sure. I mean, look, there was a time, and I'm Orthodox Jewish also, so we send our kids to private school. That's not cheap. And, so I'm paying for private school. I have 6 kids. I had 4 kids in 5 years, and then 8 years later, I had twins. So my daughter likes to say it's like the second family, but it was a burden. And, business was up and down. I was in a different industry at the time, and we had 9/11 came, and all of a sudden my cash flow was not doing well. But the banks don't care about that, the schools don't really care about that, and they still need to. So now you start to stay above water. You start to borrow. You borrow, first of all, my home line of credit on the equity on my home. Start with that because that's a lower rate. Or then you go to the credit cards and you do the credit card swap out, the ones that give you the 0%. But and you still have that dream and you still have that hope that, oh, things are going to turn around, but they don't, or they're not, unless there's something new that you're going to be doing. And I was in that industry, and what are you going to do? You're going to start all over again in a different industry. I mean, where are you going to start at the bottom? Like, what are you going to do? You're locked into where you are. And, so what are you going to do? So you just keep borrowing. And, my wife at the time, she was not the person that could handle that kind of financial stress. So I didn't even tell her anything about it. As far as she knew, nothing happened. Everything was still fine. And I didn't tell her anything. And that just puts more stress on the partner that's running it. That just makes it much more difficult for that person. Imagine the stress that you wake up in the mornings and like, what problems am I going to have today that I have to deal with by myself? And that's not what marriage is about. A marriage is a partnership, and that's what we encourage also everybody to do. Work on that together. You're a team. You got to work on that together. It's not some, usually one of the husband or wife are more responsible for the finances, but don't keep it a secret. And once it came to a point where it was like so bad that I couldn't hide it anymore. So, and she had to come to know, and we had to start fixing it, and we were able to fix it. There is hope. And those people that have financial problems, there is hope that you can fix it, and you can get over it. But the first step is just to recognize that it's there and go on from there.
Yeah, and first of all, congratulations on making your way through it. Difficult times, but then getting your wife on board, and it's scary. I get it. I think every husband, every wife can relate to. I kept it inside because number one, I was in some part ashamed that things had gone the way they were. Number two, I was fearful of how he or she is going to react, and I value my relationship with him or her, and I don't number one want to disappoint them. Number two, I don't want to make them scared the way I'm scared. And so congratulations for really taking all those very difficult elements and shedding them to light, and being able to walk through them. Which really brings me to my next question, which it revolves around education. You learn so much just by walking through it yourself. And you've talked about how, you have a heart for education, that you wanted to even help the high schools locally. What does education look like? And what is the goal of education?
So once we've done the value assessment, we get to know the client a little bit, like we talked about before. We'll go into the financial assessment. And it's pretty straightforward. It's not rocket science. Take an Excel spreadsheet, put down all your expenses, and we'll help the client with this. We'll go through it with them. I actually like to take just a pen and paper and just to mark it down. I feel like that just builds the relationship, as we talked about before, and the trust. There's no computer in between us, whatever. But we'll just take down your expenses every month, and it doesn't have to be like completely accurate, but just to give us a general sense of where you are cash flow. And a lot of times we'll see people think, oh, I thought it was a lot worse than it is, and we'll see the expenses. and we'll see what the revenue is, and we'll see that actually, you know what, it's not as depreciating as you think it is. Sometimes it is, but then if whatever comes out from that spreadsheet will give you that first step towards clarity on your current situation, and from there we'll see. Like sometimes it's an easy fix. Like people put in their 401k. We recommend that you put your 401k into the match, but not above it, because there's a lot of hidden fees. Maybe you need to reduce that contribution and generate more cash flow. Or maybe there's something like, we had one client that came in. She was a psychiatrist. He was a cardiologist. They were probably making $400,000 or $500,000 a year. And she comes in with a little pink book with all her expenses. And she says, I know I'm making money. I just don't know where it goes every month. So we did this exercise with her, took some time. We're not in a rush. She comes out, she's got like 3 different babysitters. So we say, you don't really need 3 babysitters. Your kids are in high school. She says, well, they're like family. I don't want to get rid of them. But now at least you know what your expenses are, where you need to cut, if you need to cut, what's extraneous, how much you should be saving. And that will give you that first step towards, knowing where you're going. And then once we see where you're at, and we could make that more specific. Like if you really want to know, you can track your expenses. We have some software, it's called Right Capital, that will actually be live on your credit card and your banking and your expenses. So it'll track it without you having to do anything. Or you can do like a diary like this woman did, and to find out what that is exactly. But you need to have that kind of clarity, and then we can go from there to make whatever recommendations we think are important. I'll tell you one thing we find more than anything, which drives me nuts, is people just leave a large amount of cash in an almost 0% savings account, like a Chase or whatnot. They'll have a savings account which is paying them 0% interest. You can open up a high yield savings account. Right now it's like 3.5%. It gives you a little bit more money. That's such an easy thing to open and to get started, but people just don't do it. They're scared. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. So we're going to help them with the next step to see how to maximize their growth, given their values, given their current situation.
Yeah, great advice and really good practical steps that people should take. And you touched upon something that I think everybody in our audience can appreciate, and that is they're motivated by their feelings. They feel overwhelmed. They feel as if, they don't have enough money. And by the way, they often feel that way because they look at their checking account and there's no money in it. But they don't have the facts. They don't have all the and you help take that feeling and make it practical by just showing it to them in the black and white. So how can better financial conversations change the emotional culture in the household? If everybody's walking around with their feelings, how does doing all this change the general dynamic between husband and wives that you've seen?
It's night and day. I mean, once we've talked about having the husband and wife as a team working together, and it's not a secret anymore, and one can say to the other, you know what, I think you're spending too much money. Or, the other one could say, I don't like the way that, when I go shopping at ShopRite or wherever, at groceries, and I'm buying product, I don't want you to feel, I don't want to feel like I gotta, you're looking over my shoulder. That's a lot what happens. There's like a lot of finger pointing that will go on.
Sorry to interrupt, but by doing this, you really have cleared the air and made the marriage union much stronger. Listen, I want to close this segment by reinforcing the stewardship should not be something we fear. It's about clarity and responsibility and giving families the confidence to move forward with purpose. Stay tuned as David really reveals the secrets for their success. Hi, I'm back with David Klyman, and this is part of the conversation that gets really to the heart of something every family needs to know. It's guidance from someone who truly understands their needs. You take Klyman Financial, they build the relationship, they get to know the people, and from there, people really get the information they need. So here we're going to really explore the human dimension of financial advising. Things like trust, listening, family dynamics, and the deeper responsibility that comes with helping people make decisions that honestly affect generation after generation. So, David, what does it take for a family to feel truly seen and understood when you're having conversations with them about money?
So I think we touched on it already a couple times, Chris. I mean, it's just to have an open dialogue and not to feel like people are pointing fingers and that judgments are being made. And I mean, we've had thousands of these conversations over time, and I can say that sometimes it doesn't work. Like sometimes, like one spouse just is not going to be on board; they're just not interested. So again, it's not going to work for everybody. But if people are truly interested to help themselves on both sides, husband and wife, just an open conversation, talk about what the fears are. Once you see it on paper, it makes a difference, and go from there with with the value assessment. We have our card game. We play it with both husband and wife, sometimes separately, sometimes together. Sometimes they could be at odds with each other, but that's really the first step. Just to not to feel, and we have a term for it called money talks. Don't be afraid of the money talks.
And you're reminding me that these things are a little bit like a counseling session, and they are because people often have the marriage breaks down and it's financially related. I believe at one point I had heard a statistic that it was the number one division between couples was money. So you're playing more than an advisor. You're really stepping in and having to explore the relational dynamic. In that vein, David, to the extent you want to share, tell me how this really brought you and your wife together.
So again, like there was obviously the first shock that she thought everything was great, but on my side, I just had to come clean, and the relief of it was so palpable for me that the shame that I felt, the embarrassment and failure, and just being a failure, was minor compared to just the relief. And but it was hard for her. It was very hard for her to take it as a shock. But we worked through it exactly with the steps that I've been talking about. We did our budget. We put ourselves and this is part of it as well. That with the budget, you're going to put yourself on a certain amount of cash every month. For a while, I had to cut up all my credit cards. We only used debit cards. So, that was difficult for her. And I give her a lot of credit that she was able to come through it. But, you could see what the benefit is of the end game. I mean, now, I have one credit card. I use it, but I pay it off every month. I don't have any credit card debt anymore. It's all gone. I don't even have a mortgage anymore. I own my house. So, we've turned everything around. You can, and everybody, your listeners can do too.
Yeah, it's really probably a super big weight off of your chest when you did all of that. And your children, grown adults, they witnessed all of this. And, your one son opened Klyman Financial. I'm sure there was uh, uh, something inside of him that took the story of mom and dad, as well as his desire to help people, that really was his inspiration around it, especially your inspiration for joining him. Tell me, like, how do you see this really impacting multiple generations and the people you're serving?
Well, again, we call ourselves, I say, a son father team, and it's going to be a family legacy that we're going to build. Like my sons, my oldest son who has three sons, and the son that I work with who's got two sons and a daughter. He's already teaching this financial literacy to his kids. He's already setting it up for them, and that they already know what does it mean to have a budget. What does it mean not to overspend what you make? And these concepts, as opposed to when I was growing up, was all secret. My father was a CPA and never talked about it, never told us anything. Once it's out in the open, it makes a difference.
And I'm not sure. Did your father pass before he got to see this lovely thing, or was your father around to get to see this, marriage between your son and you with Klyman Financial?
He saw it, but I grew up in Toronto, so he was up in Canada and I'm down here in New Jersey, New York. I don't think he really ever fully understood like the impact. Like I didn't go back to him and say, "Dad, why didn't you ever teach me about finance?" That wasn't the way that our relationship worked.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. But, kudos to you for really changing the Klyman legacy. Now, granted, kudos to your son for putting the foundation in place, and then for you to come in and say, you know what, there are generations here that can learn. I can take the wisdom of my years and what I've experienced and really impact others. And so tell me, that type of communication really, I'm sure you find, builds habits. And habits are, either I spend too much or I learned to stay within my budget and things like that. Can you share some family values and habits that you've seen your family and your clients develop that really impact their future financial decisions?
Well, again, like you pointed out, I mean, the most important part of that, I believe, is don't spend what you don't have. Like if your credit card debt is building up over a couple of months and you see it's growing and you're not able to pay it off, maybe there's something there that you've got to get rid of. I mean, it's easy to take a no interest credit card and transfer the payment over there, but you're just kicking the can down the road without some kind of like financial budget and some constraints there if you need it. Or sometimes we'll tell a client, you got to make more money. You got to look at ways to make more money. You can't ignore them. So on one side or the other, there's got to be financial habits that build in. Like I know you can go, like I have clients, they go to ShopRite and the wife is so busy and she'll just pay for the pre-cut zucchini. Now that's like 4 times the price. You may think, oh, it's just another couple of dollars, but that adds up. My father always said, you look after the pennies, the dollars look after themselves.
Oh, so well said. So well said. So, when you think of the families that you've helped, um, and you've gotten their financial picture running in the right direction, um, I'm sure you see those families start to thrive in other areas. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, look at, as I say, as I went through it myself, so it's something I certainly know that once you have a peace of mind and some clarity, now you're able to think about, okay, now I've looked after that. That's not consuming me on my every waking moment about how I'm going to pay the mortgage this month. But now that I have a plan in place, what's my next steps? How can I make more money? How can I maybe increase my business? Or maybe there's other opportunities that now I have the mental space to be able to think about. So it's really night and day. I mean, once you put these in place and these controls in place or some clarity in it's your life, it goes from night to day. It really is. I can't emphasize it enough.
For the people in the New Jersey area, Dave, um, what really separates Klyman Financial from the other financial advisors in your area?
So again, when I don't like to disparage anybody, and we'll be up against many times some other advisors, but they're just not taking the time to get to know the client. They're looking, like if you're talking about wealth advisors, most of the time they're just looking for assets under management to take their commission fee and to move on. They're not really, and we've had clients come to us, and when we look at their current portfolio, their current advisor has like a huge amount of money just in cash, not making any money. That to us is like criminal. I mean, there's money that you could be making that you're not. And to me, like I said to my son at one time, like these guys at these larger wealth advisory firms, They can't come back to their client and say that they're losing money, especially in this market, the way it's been the last couple of years. But they can say, well, I could have made you 9%, but we went conservative, so we only did 4%. That they can say. So a lot of times we'll see that they really haven't adjusted the portfolios correctly. And again, they haven't done the assessment on the values. They don't really get to know the clients. They're just looking more at assets under management and move on. So we take the time. Again, our client base is large. We don't work with everybody, but we want to work with those that we want to work with. And we're at the point now that we're able to do that.
That's great. And so if people want to get a hold of Klyman Financial, what is the best way for them to get to know you guys?
So just send me an email. I'm at david@klymanfinancial.com. That's Klyman with a Y. As you can see here, the only thing I know really about my grandfather when he came over from Europe was he didn't want to do the EI, he just wanted to do a lazy Y. And that's why our spelling of our last name is a little bit different. So it's david@klymanfinancial.com. You can send me an email or book on my Calendly. We could do a 15 to 30 minute session. That's really the best way to get started. There's no charge for that. That's a free consultation. And we go from there and see what makes sense.
Great. On that note, I'm going to pivot by noting that, numbers matter, but trust is what makes wise actions possible. And that's where legacy becomes deeply personal. Stay tuned for our last segment where we close things out, really honing in on the customer, the client experience at Klyman Financial. Welcome back to Your Life and Legacy. Stay connected to this show and every Now Media TV favorite, live or on demand, anytime you'd like. Download the free Now Media TV app on Roku or iOS and unlock nonstop bilingual programming in English and Spanish. You on the move? Catch the podcast version at nowmedia.tv. As I wrap up with David Klyman, I want to bring this conversation back to legacy, because what we leave behind is shaped not only by what we save, but what we model and teach and pass on to the next generation. I'll close by drawing out David's broader message about generational impact, practical wisdom, and how families can create a stronger future by becoming more intentional today. So, David, as we head into our last 12 minutes here, what do you most hope children and grandchildren inherit from wise financial leadership?
So I just hope, Mike, I have my other kids, once they go to college, they get that first credit card. All of a sudden they're thinking, I got $5,000 I can spend. Oh, I don't want them to think that that's free money. I want them to understand the impact of that and what that means. And it's more look at it more as an emergency fund than anything else, because there is consequences to your action. And that's something that you've got to take into account over time, so that you don't get into any kind of financial debt.
Yeah, that's excellent. And do you encourage? I've had many grandparents say to me, Chris, if I knew how much fun grandchildren were going to be, I just would have had them first. And so I'm sure you're no different as a grandfather. You find yourself wanting to just kind of share this kind of transparency and legacy building in with the grandkids, even so they're still little?
I do, but I keep in mind also, I'm not their parent, right? I have 6 kids. They have parents that have to guide them and teach them and bring them through life, but I'm more like a experienced older person. So certainly my older team, I actually have a pretty good relationship with him, but I'm not his parent. His parents is my son and his wife. So I don't want to tread on that boundary. But again, I want to make sure also that it's a different way of talking to them. Like what you said, like grandchildren are different. I would have had them first. I just give them advice. If they want to take it, great. I don't have the same stake that I did with my own children for some reason. So they want to take the advice. I'm always available to come and talk to, but I'm not. I'm not their parent, and I got to remember that.
Good. Boundaries, I think, is what that's called. I appreciate what you're saying there. So, what role do consistency and everyday decisions make, like those everyday habits that we kind of talked about? Which ones do you teach, and how really does that impact the family long term?
I think just be conscious every day of where you're spending your money. Well, every day that you're spending something, think about it 2 seconds. Don't just make it like it's like when you use I think the advantage and the downfall and the problem credit cards is that's too easy. You just swipe it and move on. You don't even think about it. Oh, next month I'll worry about it. And then sometimes they'll just pay the minimum. That's what leads you to build up. All of a sudden, you've got all this credit card debt and you're in trouble and you don't know how to pay it off. So therefore, you got to think about, if you're going to use a credit card, think about what you're doing every day when you're going to spend it, when you're using that card, and make sure that you know that actually is money that you're spending. And if that's not for you, if you can't think about that, maybe just go to a debit card so it automatically comes out of your account.
Do you find that a lot of financial illiteracy is really learned from their parents? Do you find that where one of your clients is at when you're trying to dig them out of their debt and set them up for a good financial future, that there's a pattern that's been formed from their parents and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about, it's like a secret. You don't learn anything like my parents never taught me anything about finances. It's like a secret. You don't talk about it. That's not something that we're gonna broach that. So it's easy to fall into that pattern and to continue, and it's not easy to break that pattern and to open the door and talk about financial legacy and talk about those money talks that people are scared to do. But once you get started on that road, it's a habit forming and it's the right way to go.
What are some of the ways that you've helped? So, like we discussed, there's always the one person in the family that's going to be in charge of the finances, and the other one that's just like, hey, as long as you get him or her in the right lane, I'll be happy. I just don't want to have to, I want to be hands off. But we know that hands off you need both in the trenches to some degree. What are some of the ways that you communicate that this is a partner relationship so that you can get the one that's not involved a little more involved?
So the value assessment that we start off with in the little card game that we play is like super important to me. Just because it gets it off on the right foot. We're not even talking about money. We're not talking about we're not making judgment.
Explain. You have 52 cards,
So
value assessment. So break it down
52
for me.
cards on each. So each card has a value. So one will be adventurous, one will be security, one will be spirituality, and it'll have 52 different values. And as you go through the card game, you discard the ones that are not as important to you. Right? So you've got 52 cards. Maybe I don't know, security is not so important. And of course, some of the cards are the same idea but in different words. So it sort of keeps people honest. And then you come down like typically the five are family, for me spirituality, wealth is some money is so you've got all these type of values that you have to choose and come up with your top five. So family, money, spirituality, like these, what is important to you? What is important to you? And sometimes I never even thought about it before, which becomes quite an exercise, because sometimes they've never even gone through any type of system like that.
So have you run into couples where you find that they each are holding five cards and they're completely opposite?
Not usually completely opposite, but definitely with different goals and values on there. It could be that usually family, everybody has that at the end, but maybe some people are more interested to retire earlier. Some people are more interested in adventure, or maybe they're more interested more on the security or more on the spiritual side. So usually, two or three are usually, pretty universal, but then there's always that couple that come in that they don't, but that's what we're diverse. We're individuals. Everybody's different, right? So we should have different values.
So now you have 10 cards. Everybody's got family in their hand. So now you have 8 cards, 8 values, and let's just pretend that they're all different. I suppose this is an excellent marriage exercise because now you have 8 different things that you can put down and ensure that the 4 important things for the one spouse and the 4 for the other spouse are all heard. The last thing, of course, you'd want to do is say, well, this one doesn't matter. Then somebody's not going to be heard. So I'm sure this is a great exercise, even in just marriage relationships.
Correct. So, but we're not marriage counselors. We're not going to resolve your marriage issues if that's what it is. We can recommend to you, like some of our clients are counselors and psychologists, psychiatrists, but then we're going to jump into the next stage. Our goal is on the financial. We don't want to forget about that. And it's going to center around 3 areas. It's going to be around portfolio management, asset protection, and tax minimization. So we're going to take what your goals are and translate it into those 3 areas, combined with the financial fact find to come up with a strategy that's going to work for everybody.
I love that. And so unpack a little bit of the avenues you go down through asset protection.
So asset protection will be, we do a lot of wealth advising. We do also a lot of life insurance, disability insurance, long-term care. So, want to make sure, of course, that you have enough they have enough life insurance, that is the right kind, whether it's term insurance or permanent insurance. A lot of people hear about whole life. We're not big fans of that type of product. There's other types of permanent products that we like that will have living benefits and long-term care. That's very important as well. So you want to make sure that your assets are going to be protected. God forbid something should happen to one of the spouses. You want to make sure there's going to be enough money there. Could be in a trust. We'll work with a trust and estate attorney, put it into the trust so it doesn't affect right now, like the state taxes, especially federal, are very high and looking that they'll continue, and they're going to continue. So it's not as an issue as it was before. But that's going to be somewhere that we're going to look at your asset protection, or maybe it's going to be annuities if you like. I know they've gotten a bad rap, or maybe it'll be some conservative investments, depending on what you're looking for. We have 800 different asset strategies that we can recommend.
That's great. And we have about a minute left, so we'll wrap up with a quick question here. You mentioned estate planning. I'm sure that's a very important segment in the full picture. Does Klyman Financial, help direct them to a good attorney if they don't have one, and getting their estate plan set up so that the legacy passes on in a nice, clean, organized fashion?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually, Klyman Financial is across the country. We're in almost every state, and we have contacts and good partners that we work with almost in every state. So we can recommend somebody to you in Florida or in Los Angeles, in California, or even in Illinois or Texas or Mississippi. So we're going to recommend someone that we trust, that we've worked with, that we know well, to make sure that if you do need that kind of estate, and we don't want to over-estate either, right? Like sometimes, everybody says my doorman told me I need a trust. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe your doorman is not the right person to take that advice from.
Well, and I'm glad that you are available for people and families, and that you are that Klyman Financial, the son and father team, is really helping lots of people. Listen, I'm Christopher Nudo, and this has been Your Life and Legacy. Many, many thanks to David Klyman for a conversation that reminds us that legacy is not only about what we accumulate, it's about wisdom we share, the trust we build, and the lives we strengthen along the way. I'll see you next time. Have a great day.